Hello to my fellow wanderers. It's the Wandering Hermit here. Um, just doing a quick one to talk about an experience I had recently. I was talking to my wife about, you know, the nature of non-linear time and how if time isn't linear, then is it possible to go back into the past and change things to affect the future, or at least the present moment? Because a lot of people say that the past is again technically just as illusory and non-existent as the future. But uh, I wanted to test the theory to see if it's possible to go back into a past memory of, in my current form, you could say, if you believe in the whole reincarnation thing, rather than going to a past life memory, going to a memory from earlier in my life, and seeing if I can plant a seed in the mind of my younger self to affect positive change in the present. So what I did is I went on a meditation, which I've never tried before, well, of this particular kind. Um, I started out by focusing on the ticking of the clock in the room with me, and I just tried to sit in stillness, and I waited, and I let the sound of the clock fill me until it started to echo inside my head. Um, and then I think as you let the sound sort of reverberate through you, it's just it starts to take on a life of its own, and the sound start to invoke images in my mind. Those images then started to take on their own life, and forms emerged. Anyway, I found myself standing in, or rather, should I say, walking down a corridor without end, or no perceivable end anyway. I couldn't see behind me because what was behind me, because I was travelling backwards in time, behind me represented the future, which is unseeable. So, as I'm walking down this corridor, I hear my own footsteps echoing with the ticking of the clock, but then the reverberation of that sound turned into a second set of footsteps, and there was a hooded figure walking beside me, um, who I instantly assigned the role of the keeper of the archives. That was the name that I, or the title that I gave to this figure, unwillingly, but there it was. So the keeper of the archives was walking me down this um, exceptionally long corridor, and it wasn't just long, it was immensely high, to the point where you couldn't see a ceiling. It sort of disappeared into mist. The whole place seemed devoid of light of any perceptible source, all very dimly lit with sort of smoky, stormy blue and black, um, which I can only imagine represents my subconscious. So as I'm walking down this corridor, there's a massive pendulum swinging over, just kind of coming into view in amongst the fog above, and then disappearing again, and then swinging back. And um, I realise that I can't hear the ticking of the clock anymore. I can only hear the pendulum. And for every swing of that pendulum, I realise there's 1 second passing. So perception of time in that mind state, in that internal reality, is completely different to how we perceive time in the external world. But anyway, we're walking along this corridor, and the keeper of the archives, he stops and presents a small door on my left hand side and says, "This archive represents every single thing that you have ever seen, not just things that you've interacted with, but anything that has crossed your line of sight, anything that you've touched, anything that you've heard or smelt, any emotion you felt, any thought that you've had, any dream, any interaction with every single person, um, even down to the minutest of physiological things, such as an itch or a muscle spasm or anything of that kind, a little glimpse in your peripheral vision, all of that exists in this record, this archive. And he says, not just from this life, but from every life that you've ever lived, every form that you've ever taken. So this intrigued me. But as we approached this small door on the left, he said, this section is for your current form. So we went through, and I was expecting it to be a small room, but again, it was another really long corridor, equally high. But lining the walls were shelves, and in the shelves, I don't know whether I'm just getting this from Harry Potter or something. It kind of reminded me of Harry Potter, in Order of the Phoenix, when they go to the Department of Mysteries. That's kind of what it reminded me of. Shelves upon shelves of glass jars. They weren't orbs. They were actual like mason jars. But each one had a memory inside. And we walked along the shelves until we found a particular memory. He said, what is it that you are here to do? So I thought, and I said to him, I want to convey a message to my past self. He said, okay, what message do you want to convey? I said, I don't know yet. He said, okay, what is it that you want to achieve in conveying a message to your past self? I said, again, I don't know yet. He said, okay, what would benefit you the most at this point in your life from whence you have come to this place? And what would benefit you through your life up to that point and then beyond? I said, well, I've always had issues with dealing with my emotions. I've always had anxiety. I've always had anger outbursts. I've always had bouts of depression. I thought, okay, it's just dealing with those negative emotions. I've only recently come to an understanding of how to get a handle on those and how to transmute them into something positive, or how to direct them in a more creative way, etc., etc. So I thought, if I could plant a seed in the mind of my younger self to manifest this sooner, then it may have a positive effect on my current state of being. I may find handling my emotions even easier than I already do. So, right, okay. Now we have to think of the first time you ever experienced an outburst of any kind. One that wasn't typically down to, an ordinary childish tantrum. Okay. So, my earliest memories are of fighting with an old friend back in primary school, and it was completely uncalled for. I was a complete arse. And I was unreasonable, and I would get angry and aggressive over little tiny things that shouldn't matter. So, okay, I want to try and go back to the point just before all of that started. Right, okay. So, we found a memory from when I first started primary school, just before all of that started. And it was a memory that felt so familiar to me once I stepped into it. But it was of when I was about 6 or 7 years old. About 6. And I was lying in bed one evening. It was just getting dark. Sort of late spring, early summer. And I'd been reading a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book. And I was really excited because it was the first book that I'd ever read all the way through in one day. And I was determined to finish it, even though I'd been told to go to sleep about 2 hours before. So I stayed up and I read it and I read it and read it until I finished it. And I finally was like, yeah, I've done it. So I put the book down and I curled up and I went to sleep. And I was watching this as myself, as an ethereal or metaphysical being in the room at the time, watching this happen. And as I watched my younger self fall asleep, I saw shapes start to emerge from behind the head. Little wisps, and they would then float around like smoke or like ink in water, which is one of the most common forms that memories or images take for me. And then they started to take form and then spread. And then the room around my younger self would suddenly be engulfed in this dream that my 6-year-old self was having. And inside myself, I had the memory of waking up the next day sad because I'd had a bad dream. So my guide said to me, brush those bad thoughts away. It's your time to change this moment. So I did. I went forward and I swept the dark cloud of dream away from my past self. And my past self woke up, but not physically woke up, but in his own dream. He became conscious. I was lucid dreaming. And my 6-year-old self sat up out of his body and was looking at me. So I sat on the edge of the bed. And I said to him, do you know who I am? And I said to myself, are you an angel or a ghost? I couldn't help but laugh at that point. I said, I'm not a ghost, but you could say I'm like an angel. He said, oh, okay. Why are you here? I said, well, I've come to tell you something, and it's really important that you listen and that you do as I tell you. He said, why? Who are you? And at that point, I reached forward and I touched him right on the forehead there and said, I'm you. I'm you from the future. At that point, when I made contact with him, or me, I felt this rush of energy. I mean, even in my physical body, as I was sitting there in meditation, I felt this rush of energy go through me. Made me feel hot and cold at the same time, all prickly everywhere. And I felt it as the disembodied version of myself, and I felt it as my past self. And I knew that there was this instant connection, and I kind of felt as though something in my universe shifted. And then, rather than just having the vaguest memory of waking up the next morning and going, oh, I had a bad dream, I feel sad, I had the memory from being my 6-year-old self, sitting there talking to my current self. I don't know what I've changed, metaphysically speaking, whether I've created a parallel reality in which this actually happened, or whether this has genuinely changed the reality in which I'm currently living. Either way, a connection was made. Something has changed. And I said to my old self, I need you to really focus when you feel sad or angry, when you want to hurt somebody, or when you want to break something, or when you want to shout and cry. What I want you to do is grab it. When you feel it in the tightness in your chest, I want you to grab hold of it and imagine that you're pulling it out of you like a big rope, big black string. So can you do that for me? I don't know, because I don't feel bad. I said, okay, but just imagine that you're just grabbing something inside yourself. Just go like this. Just grab it and really just pull. So my past self did that. And I said, you keep pulling. Even if you still feel it in there, if you still feel bad, you keep pulling until you feel it's all gone, until it's all out of you. So he kept pulling. He's pulling away. Just get it out, get it out. And then he suddenly stopped and went, oh, I feel good. I said, okay, now take that big black string, wrap it all up in a big ball, and then throw it away. So he did. He just, mind throwing this blackness away. I said, every time you get angry or every time you get sad, I want you to do that. And remember talking to me now. I want you to remember this moment, this dream, and I want you to really focus on that. Don't get angry with people. Don't hurt people. Don't lash out. Don't throw things. Don't shout. Just pull it out and throw it away. He said, okay, I can do that. So good. And then at that moment, I said, you have to seal this. It's a deal. You can't break it. You have to shake on it. And he just nodded and went, okay. So I said, shake on it. And he took my hand. And again, I felt a massive rush of energy go through me. My past self, my disembodied self, and my physical self, all at once. Again, hot and cold at the same time, prickly all over. Felt the whole cosmos shift around me. I said, that's it. You struck a deal. You have to do that. You have to stick to that now. And as soon as that deal was made, as soon as I released his hand, I was disturbed by one of my pet felines run into the room, hyperactive, playing, burst the door open, and it threw me back into myself, and I fell backwards onto the floor with the force of my consciousness falling back into myself. But at that moment, I suddenly felt so much lighter, as though all of the memories from all of the bad things that I'd done in my life, all of the tantrums that I've had, all the arguments that I've had, all of the actual fights that I've had with friends and family over the years, all of that seemed to just lift and dissipate. And it was as if it had never actually happened. I know in my mind that it has. I have the memory of those things happening, but the guilt, the weight that I've carried from that over the years is no longer there. So, to my mind, from what I've observed and experienced through this meditation, it's my belief that I've actually been able to send my consciousness out of myself backwards to a previous version of me that was open to that. And I've changed something in my mindset much earlier on to institute change in the present. I don't know if this will work for everybody. I hope it does. But if anyone out there is having thoughts about, how, is there anything that I can do to make things easier for myself? Is there anything, that people always say, if you could give a message to your past self in like 4 words, what would it be? Or in 2 words is the most common. Mine would be either be happy or love everyone. Because that's something I've struggled with over the years. I used to be the most loving and caring and generous person when I was really, really little. I'd always want to help everybody. But then, as things happened and my past self was influenced by the external world, I lost that ability and I became very, very hard, very cold. And I'm only just starting to go back to my old self. So I hope that this has either just been an interesting thing to hear about and experience, but most of all, I do hope that this is helpful. I hope it gives you some ideas as to your own meditations. Just go on a little vision quest and see what you can discover. If you actually have a goal in mind, then really focus on that when you embark on this little wandering. And you never know what might happen. You never know what you might change in your life, what you'll change in yourself. And that the most important thing is that you at least try, because you'll never know until you try. So good luck, have fun with your wanderings, and I hope this has been a help for you. I'll bid you a good day or night wherever you are in the world, and may God's be with you.